I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you decide I'm just a crazy old woman. My husband left me. He walked out on me when I was 58 years old, left me for a woman 20 years younger than him, somebody he worked with. And everybody felt sorry for me. My friends called. "Oh, Margaret, what a coward. What a thing to do to you after all these years." The neighbors whispered on their porches. My own children were sick about it. But I'm going to tell you the truth now. The truth it took me years to understand. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't know it yet. It took me about 6 months to find out. My name is Margaret. I'm 81 years old, and today I'm going to tell you how the worst day of my life turned into the best one. Not right away, but it did. So pour yourself a cup of coffee and sit with me a while. I don't get many people to talk to anymore, and I've got something worth saying. Let me start at the beginning. I married Richard when I was 23. That's how we did things back then. You met a fella, you courted a little while, and you got married. Richard was a good man by the standards of the time. He didn't drink, he didn't run around, he worked hard. He ran a hardware store on Main Street for 30 years. By the measure of that town, I'd married well. Folks told me I was lucky, and in a lot of ways, I was. I want to be fair to him. He was steady, but I'll tell you what kind of life it was. It was his life, and I lived next to it. His mood decided what kind of evening we'd have. If he came home pleased about something, everybody smiled. If he came home with a cloud over him, the whole house went quiet. The children learned to read his face from across the room before he even hung up his coat. So did I. And I thought that was normal. I really did. I thought that's just how a marriage was built. The man out front and the woman behind him holding things up. I thought my wants were something I'd get to later, after the children, after the bills, after everything else got taken care of. Later, later, later. Now let me tell you about 3 little things. They're going to seem like nothing, but you remember them because they come back around at the end. The first one. I wanted to paint. Always did since I was a girl. Watercolors. My art teacher in high school, Mrs. Daly, she told my mother, "That girl has a real eye. You ought to send her on for it." And I loved it more than just about anything. When Richard and I were courting, I told him about it, kind of shy, and he said, "That's not a serious thing, Margaret. Artists starve." So I put my brushes in a drawer, and they sat in that drawer for 35 years. The second thing, I wanted to see the ocean. I grew up right in the middle of this country, flat farmland as far as you could look, and I had never once in my life seen the sea. I used to dream about it, and one time I said, "Richard, wouldn't it be something, just the 2 of us, to drive out and see the Pacific?" And he looked at me like I'd said something foolish, and he said, "What on earth would you do all the way out there?" So we didn't go. The third thing, I wanted a cat, just a cat, to keep me company in the daytime. Richard didn't care for cats, so there was no cat. Little things, every one of them, nothing. But there were 35 years of them, and out of all those little nothings, a life gets built. Only it wasn't my life. It was a life lived right next to his. Now I'll tell you about that day. I remember it like it was this morning. It was October, raining outside, that cold, gray rain we get. I had a casserole in the oven. Richard came home early, which he never did, and he sat down at the kitchen table, and he didn't say anything for the longest time. And you know what? I felt it before he ever opened his mouth. Women always feel it. We just pretend sometimes that we don't, because knowing is scarier than not knowing. He talked for a long while. He explained. He apologized in his way. He said her name. I won't say it because I pushed it right out of my head the moment I heard it. She was 38. She worked at the store. And it had been going on for a year and a half. A year and a half. While I was standing at that stove making his supper. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, not in front of him. I just sat there, and I listened to all of it. And when he was done, I stood up, and I turned off the oven, and I said, "All right, Richard, go on." He left that same night, packed a bag, and went to her. And I sat at that kitchen table till the sun came up, looking at his half-eaten supper going cold on the plate. I don't remember the next 6 months too well. It comes back to me in pieces. I remember I lost a good bit of weight. My clothes hung on me. I remember I'd turn the television on and just sit there and not hear one word of it. I remember my friend Ruth came over every Saturday and made me a pot of soup because I'd mostly quit eating. And I remember my oldest, Susan, called me every single evening and she'd say, "Mom, how are you doing?" And I'd say, "I'm fine, honey." And that was a lie. I wasn't fine. I wasn't anywhere close to fine. 58 years old. By myself. 35 years gone. And what was left? A house where everything in it reminded me of him. Kids with their own families, their own lives. And me, a woman who didn't know what to do with all that quiet. I thought, who needs me now? I thought, it's too late to start anything. I thought, well, that's it then. From here on out, I'm just running out the clock. That's an awful feeling, just running out the clock. I'd never felt it from the inside before. And let me tell you, it'll hollow a person out. And then, one morning, it was spring by then, the better part of 6 months gone by, I got up, I went down to the kitchen, and I put the coffee on. And I caught myself standing there thinking a strange little thought. What do I want for breakfast? It sounds so silly, but I stood there and I could not answer it. For 35 years I'd made what Richard liked. He liked his eggs scrambled hard and bacon every single morning. So I ate scrambled eggs and bacon. And right then it hit me. I didn't have the first idea what I liked. Nobody had ever asked me. I'd never asked myself. So I made myself a stack of blueberry pancakes with real butter and syrup, just because I felt like it. And I'll tell you, you're going to laugh, but that was the first food in 6 months that tasted like anything at all. I sat at that table eating my pancakes, and I thought, Margaret, you spent 35 years not even knowing what you wanted for breakfast. Now, isn't that the strangest thing a person ever heard? That breakfast, that's where it all started. Now, before I go on, let me ask you something, and I mean it from the heart. If anything I'm saying is touching something in you, if you know a woman who needs to hear this, go on and give this video a like and subscribe to my channel so it finds its way to her. And do me one kindness. Tell me down in the comments where you're watching from. What town, what state, what country. It means more than you could know for an old woman sitting here talking to find out there's somebody out there in the world listening. I read them, every one. All right, now let me tell you what happened next, because this is the good part. I started to remember. What did I used to love before him? Who was I before I was Mrs. Richard? I went and found those brushes in the drawer. 35 years they'd sat there, dried up, hard as little rocks, no good to anyone. So I drove down to the art supply store. First time in my whole life I ever walked into a place like that. And I stood there in the middle of all those colors, all those tubes of paint lined up, and I just about cried. Not from sadness, from this, that it was all just sitting there, and I could buy any of it I wanted, and there was nobody on this earth to say to me, "Now what do you need that for, Margaret?" I bought the paints. I started up again. I was terrible at first, I'll be honest. My hand had forgotten how. But I found a little watercolor class down at the community center. Grown women, some of them 60, some of them 70, all of us learning to paint. I was 59. I was the young one. Then I did something I'd been wanting to do for 35 years. I got in my car, by myself, and I drove all the way out to see the ocean. Took me the better part of 3 days. 81 years old now, and I can still tell you exactly how it felt. I parked and I walked over those dunes, and there it was. The whole Pacific Ocean, bigger than anything I'd ever laid eyes on. And I stood there with the wind coming off the water, and I thought, I wanted this for 35 years. 35 years. And there was never one single soul stopping me. Only me. Because I'd gotten so used to asking permission, I forgot I didn't need anyone's permission to live. And then I got my cat, a big orange tomcat from the shelter. I named him Marmalade. Richard never could stand cats, and now I had myself a cat. The best cat in the whole world, I might add. He slept on the foot of my bed, and he'd sit in the window while I painted, and he was company, real company. It sounds like little things, a class, a drive, a cat. But it wasn't little things. It was me, the real me, the one I hadn't met in 35 years. I'm 81 now, and I want to tell you 3 things, honest things, no sugar on them. The first thing, I don't hold a grudge against Richard. I don't. What he did wasn't right, that's the truth of it. But I'll tell you something, if he'd never left, I'd have lived out my whole life in that box. A nice, cozy, comfortable little box that I had folded myself up into and pulled the lid down over. He knocked me clean out of it. It hurt. Lord, it hurt. But he knocked me out, and I landed out in the open air, and it turned out the open air was a fine place to be. The second thing, a woman who loses herself in a marriage, that is not a weak woman. Don't you ever let anybody tell you that. She's a woman who was raised that way, taught from a little girl to put everybody else out in front of herself. That's not a sin, but it's no virtue either, if at the end of it there's nothing left of you at all. So if you're sitting there right now, and you can't remember what you even like for breakfast, that's your sign. Don't wait around for life to knock you out of the box the hard way, like it did me. Climb out yourself while there's still time. The third thing, being alone and being free, those are not the same thing. I had them mixed up for the longest while. I thought, alone means lonely, means sad, means nobody wants you. That is not true. I was alone and I was free. I picked where I went and what I ate and who I talked to and how I spent my Sunday. After 35 years of living on another person's schedule, that was like coming up for the first breath of air after being underwater a long, long time. You're probably wondering whatever happened to Richard. He passed away, about 12 years ago now. And that younger woman, She called me up one time after. I don't know why. Her conscience, maybe. And I talked to her real calm. I wished her well, and I hung up the phone. At his funeral, I stood there and I thought about it all. We had 35 years together. We were young once. We raised 2 children. We fought and we made up, and we drove out to the lake every summer. That was a life, a real one, with everything in it that a life has. And I don't want to scratch it out. I won't. But the best years of my whole life were the ones that came after. The 23 years that were mine, all the way mine. My Susan said it to me one time. She said, "Mom, after Dad left, you came back to life." And she was right. So if you're going through something like that right now, a loss, a betrayal, the end of something you were sure was going to last forever, I'm not going to sit here and promise you it's all going to be fine. I don't know if it will. I'm too old to lie to you. But I'll tell you this much. You don't know yet who you are without that person, without that marriage, without that whole life that just came apart in your hands. You don't know because you haven't tried yet. So try. Start small. Start with this. Tomorrow morning, you make yourself the breakfast you actually want. Not the one you're used to, not the one that's easy, the one you want. I know that sounds like nothing, but sometimes a whole new life starts right there at the kitchen table with a plate of something you made just for you. If this story moved something in your heart, do an old woman a favor and give it a like and subscribe to the channel so I can keep telling you these things. And write me in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, and tell me this. Was there ever a time in your life when losing something turned out to set you free? I'd dearly love to know. I read every last one of them. This has been Margaret, 81 years old, 1 orange cat, a drawer full of paintbrushes, and not one single regret. You take care of yourself now. Goodbye.